Hello everyone. If you like this audiobook and want to listen to more, please consider subscribing. And if you like this video, like it as well, that it enjoy.
Mark Grayson. 3 days after Guardian HQ, Mr. Perfect Cell had come to a realization. Being the most powerful entity on the planet came with a significant amount of sitting around doing absolutely nothing. He'd read everything in the cabin. Twice. He'd watched whatever the television had to offer. He'd reorganized the kitchen out of boredom, which took 11 minutes. He'd sat on the porch and listened to the forest for a while. He went outside. He found the court by accident, flying low over a neighborhood in Atlanta, no destination, no plan, when he heard it. The specific acoustic signature of a basketball hitting asphalt, sneakers cutting, someone talking shit. He drifted down. Half court, 5 guys running a pickup game. Good players, the kind of good that comes from playing the same court for years until the game stops being something you think about and starts being something you just do. One of them noticed him. Then another. The game stopped. Cell looked at the ball. "Run it back," he said. The guy holding it, maybe 17, fitted cap, had been absolutely cooking before Cell landed, looked at him. Looked at the ball. Bounced it over. Here's the thing about having Cell's body. Rico Ramirez had played basketball his whole life. Pickup games, gym class, hours in the driveway. He knew the game. He had the IQ, the reads, the instincts, all of it was there, fully intact, carried over from a life that had ended via communism and deposited wholesale into a biomechanical android built for the destruction of all life. What he did not have was calibration. His first dribble sent the ball straight through the asphalt. Everyone stared at the hole. "My bad," Cell said. Fitted cap looked at the hole. Looked at Cell. Looked at his boy on the sideline. He said slowly. "You got another ball." They found another ball. Older, a little flat. Cell handled it like it was made of tissue paper for the first 2 possessions, either losing it completely or launching it somewhere structurally inappropriate. His first shot attempt left a perfect cell-shaped imprint in the backboard. "Bro," someone on the sideline wheezed. "I'm trying okay," Cell said. Cell looked at the backboard. Looked at his hands. Made a quiet internal adjustment. "Run it back," he said. By the 3rd game he had the touch mostly figured out. By the 5th game he had fitted cap's tendencies mapped, the hesitation left before the drive, the way he telegraphed the pull-up, and started taking it away. Fitted cap pulled up. Cell was already there. Clean contest. Ball off the rim. "Oh, nah, Fitted cap said immediately, hands up. "Nah, that was a foul. I didn't touch you. You was in my space. You shot it into my face. That's a foul in the NBA. This is not the NBA. It's the principle." "The principle of what?" "The principle of you suck." The sideline was in pieces. "Run it back," Cell said. Fitted cap pointed at him. Aight. I see you. You've been seeing me for 5 games, Cell said. See me better. Oh, he left after the 7th game. Score even, everyone's dignity more or less intact. "You'll come back tomorrow," someone shouted after him. He was already in the air. He flew north with no destination, replaying the 3rd quarter of Game 5 in his head, thinking about the pick-and-roll coverage, which was either a sign that he was genuinely enjoying himself or a sign that he needed more things to do. Probably both. He was somewhere over New Jersey, moving at a comfortable pace, thinking about nothing in particular. Something hit him in the side of the head. Not hard, not combat hard. The specific impact of something that had been moving with complete confidence and had found an obstacle it had absolutely not accounted for. He stopped, looked down. In the alley below, beside a dumpster, a kid was sitting up slowly and pressing his palm to his forehead with the expression of a man who had just walked face-first into a glass door he was certain wasn't there. Cell floated down. The kid was maybe 16. Red shirt, jeans, glasses that had somehow survived the landing. A bandana tied around the lower half of his face in the manner of someone who had watched exactly enough superhero movies to think that was a disguise. He looked up at Cell. His brain, visibly, was having a meeting with itself and the meeting was not going well. The hand extended toward him said help. Everything else in the picture said run. He sat with this conflict for a moment. Took the hand. Cell pulled him up. "You good?" "Yeah, The kid pressed his palm to his forehead again. "Did I just hit a person?" "Biomechanical android. I hit a biomechanical android. Face first. I thought I hit a building or something." "I'm going to choose to be offended by that," Cell said. He looked the kid over. The bandana, the glasses, The red shirt with absolutely nothing on it, no symbol, no suit, nothing. Just a teenager who had clearly gotten powers recently and decided today was the day. Cell put his hand to his chin. 950, not bad Superboy, he said. Quote. What? Nothing. He tilted his head. You got any relation to Omni-Man? Clone maybe. The kid's face did something very fast and very complicated. Surprise, alarm, a flash of does he know, before he got it mostly under control. What? No, I don't. Why would you even? Relax, I'm messing with you. Cell waved a hand. What's your name, Superboy? Stop calling me that. What should I call you? A pause. I don't have a hero name yet. Cell looked at him, at the bandana, at the jeans, at the glasses sitting slightly crooked from the landing. First day, the kid looked down at himself. Back up. Quote. Yeah, he said. Right. Cell nodded slowly, generously, like he was about to give genuinely useful advice. Okay, whatever name you pick, and I mean this with full sincerity, it should reference falling. Specifically falling, out of the sky. He paused, like pigeon shit or something. I wasn't falling, I was flying. You hit me at 500 kilometers an hour over New Jersey and dropped into a dumpster. That was an accident, a falling accident, a flying accident. What were you flying into, the dumpster? I didn't see you. I am 2 meters tall and bright green. I was going fast. Into me, I didn't know you were there. Where did you think I was? The kid stopped, breathed. I'm still getting used to the speed, he said, with enormous dignity. Sure, Cell said pleasantly. I believe you completely. You don't have to say it like that. Like what? I said I believe you. The kid looked at him with the expression of someone who had just identified a specific kind of person and was unhappy about it. You're one of those guys, he said. What guys? The guys who say something nice but make it sound like the opposite. I have no idea what you're talking about, Cell said. I think it's very impressive that you're out here on your first day. The bandana especially, very intimidating. The kid looked at him. Quote. Thank you, he said carefully. The jeans really complete it. Okay, very heroic, very I just got my powers and grabbed whatever was clean. I'm going to. Sirens. Both of them turned. 3 blocks north, police sirens, and underneath them something heavier. The specific sound of mass moving through a street that wasn't built for it. The kid was in the air in under a second. No deliberation, no plan, just sound and then gone. The beautiful reckless instinct of someone who had decided what their powers were for approximately 72 hours ago and hadn't second-guessed it since. Cell watched him go. Kids. He followed. From above, 2 cruisers blocking an intersection, officers behind cover, and a man built entirely from granite jogging through the street carrying 2 guys in his arms like oversized groceries. Both passengers clutching duffel bags with the specific grip of people who had recently acquired something that didn't belong to them. The kid was already descending toward Titan with the committed energy of someone who had a plan. Cell appeared in front of Titan first. 1 finger, a flick, the precise calibrated force of someone who had spent 3 days learning the difference between redirect this and remove this from the planet. Titan left the ground horizontally, cleared a parked sedan, and introduced himself to a police cruiser at the far end of the block with a sound like God closing a car door. He did not get up. His passengers landed in the street. 1 duffel bag opened. Money distributed itself across the asphalt. The kid was frozen 6 feet off the ground, staring at the space where Titan had been standing. Cell said. He glanced at one of the officers, who was looking at him with the expression of a man whose training had not covered this exact scenario. He should probably see a doctor, Cell said, nodding toward the end of the block. The other 2 are fine. The officer nodded, reached for his radio, then the key signature hit. Enormous, unmistakable, moving with the directional purpose of something that had picked a destination and was eating the distance. Cell looked up. Omni-Man came in from the east and landed 30 feet away like punctuation. Eyes moving across the scene in 2 seconds, criminals down, money in the street, police, Cell. And then his eyes found the kid. Something crossed Nolan's face. Fast, controlled, mostly hidden. The specific expression of a man who has found something in a location he did not put it. He looked at Cell. Where did you meet him? Not a question. Flat, with something underneath it that was trying not to be an edge. Cell found this very interesting. So, not a clone. Would you believe, he said, about 10 minutes ago. He flew into me, literally, over New Jersey. Nolan looked at the kid. The kid looked back at his father, because that was clearly what this was, with the expression of someone doing very fast math on how much trouble they were in. He's telling the truth, the kid said. I was flying and I didn't see him and it was an accident. With me, Nolan said. Now, just that, the tone of a man whose attention had completely relocated. He went skyward. The kid looked at Cell. Cell was holding a bucket of popcorn. The kid stared at the bucket. Stared at Cell. Stared at the bucket again with the expression of a person whose brain had just added one thing too many to the pile. Where did that come from? He said. Cell looked at the bucket. Looked at him. What? He said. The kid stood there for one more second. Decided, with the practical wisdom of someone who had already had an extremely full 15 minutes, that this was not a question he needed answered today. He flew after his father. Cell watched him go, ate a handful. Looked at the officers. The officers looked at him. Money fluttered in the street between them. Good kid, he said. Flew north. 4 comments 0 vote. A world without borders. The thing about having no biological needs was that you filled the time however you could. Rico had spent the morning doing what had become a loose routine, flying low over the East Coast, no destination, no agenda. He'd stopped at a diner in Delaware because the smell coming through the ventilation was interesting and he'd wanted to see if he could still eat without it becoming a situation. He could. The waitress had handled his presence with the professional composure of someone who had decided, somewhere around table 3, that today was simply going to be like this. He tipped well, flew north. He was somewhere over Philadelphia, thinking about nothing in particular, when he felt it. Not heard, not saw, felt, key signatures going out, small ones, civilian level, the background texture of a place full of living people, extinguishing one after another in the specific rhythm of something being done quickly and on purpose. Not an accident, not a disaster. A choice. He stopped mid-flight, felt for the direction. Southwest, far southwest, across the Atlantic. He was already moving. Somalia in under 20 seconds. He came in high and slowed and let the picture resolve below him and wished, for a moment, that it hadn't. The village was small, maybe 300 people on a good day, the kind of place that existed in the margins of maps, a cluster of structures built from whatever was available, surrounded by dry earth and scrub brush in the specific poverty of a place that the rest of the world had decided wasn't worth the cost of attention. It was on fire. Not all of it, specific buildings, targeted, he realized, the ones that had been locked from the outside before someone put a torch to them. He could hear what was inside them. His key sense didn't distinguish between the signatures of people who were running and people who weren't. It just registered the ones going out. On the roads, military vehicles. Soldiers moving through in organized columns with the efficiency of people who had rehearsed this. Some of them were going door to door. Others had civilians lined up against a wall, men, mostly, hands behind their heads, kneeling in the dirt while someone walked behind them with a sidearm. He saw the children, a group of them, maybe 8 or 10, running down a dirt road toward the edge of the village. 2 soldiers behind them, gaining. He saw what the soldiers were carrying. Scalps. He stopped moving. Just stopped, floating 200 feet above it all, completely still, and felt the key do what it always did when he stopped holding it back, the ground below trembling, clouds pulling in overhead with unnatural speed, lightning starting to thread between them. The wind hit the village from all directions at once, scattering dust and debris, and everything on the ground stopped and looked up at the sky. At the figure hanging above them, perfectly still. Nobody fired. The specific paralysis of people whose threat assessment system had just encountered something it didn't have a category for. His phone rang. He didn't reach for it. The call connected anyway. Cell. Cecil. Controlled, careful, the tone he used when he was managing something delicate. I'm aware of the situation. I need you to hold position. There is an established protocol for international intervention on sovereign territory. I am on the line with the UN Security Council right now. I am working on authorization to deploy the Guardians, but if you act unilaterally without. Rico watched one of the soldiers grab a child by the arm. Don't worry, Cecil, he said. His voice came out completely calm. The specific calm of a decision that had already been made. I'm not going to do anything. He landed. The impact sent a shockwave through the earth hard enough to knock 3 soldiers off their feet 50 meters away. He straightened slowly, looked around. At the bodies on the ground he was trying not to count. At the fires. At the soldier who still had the child by the arm and was now frozen, looking at Cell with the expression of a man who had just understood something about his afternoon. Rico looked at him. His eyes went red. He raised one finger. Every weapon in the village left the hands holding them simultaneously: rifles, sidearms, machetes, the mounted guns on the vehicles, all of it, and streaked skyward at a velocity that left no time for reaction. Into the sky, into orbit, into nothing. The vehicles followed, lifted from the ground with their engines still running, flung upward until they were gone. The child pulled free, ran. Then Rico exhaled and let the weight of his key settle outward. Not a blast, not an attack, just presence. The full unfiltered gravity of what he was, moving through the ground and the air like a sound too low to hear but not too low to feel. The part of the brain older than language received it the only way it knew how. The soldiers went to their knees. Not commanded, not asked. The way a flame bends in a strong wind, just physics. The natural result of two things occupying the same space when one of them was what he was. They knelt in the dirt in front of the people they'd been killing. Some of them were already crying. One was praying in a language Rico didn't speak, the words coming out fast and desperate, directed at something that wasn't there or maybe was. Another had wet himself and was staring at the ground with the vacant expression of a man whose mind had gone somewhere else to wait this out. Cecil was still talking. Something about protocol, something about sovereignty. The words reached Rico from very far away. The village was moving, slowly at first, a door opening, a face appearing, the cautious emergence of people who had learned that silence sometimes meant it was safe and sometimes meant it wasn't and had no reliable way to tell the difference. They came out and they saw the soldiers in the dirt and they saw what was standing behind them and they stood still for a moment, processing. Then someone made a sound. Not a word, something underneath words, the specific sound of a person who has been holding something enormous inside them and has just been handed permission to stop. It moved through the crowd like a wave. The grief came out first. Then the anger. Then both of them together, and the crowd moving, picking up whatever they could find, boards, rocks, the handles of tools left in the dirt, and advancing toward the soldiers with the slow collective weight of people who had been given something they hadn't expected. Cecil's voice on the phone. Cell, I understand what you're feeling, but you need to think about what happens after this. If you become the arbiter of life and death, you are not different from. Rico watched the crowd advance. The first person reached the soldiers. A woman, middle-aged, a cut across her forehead still bleeding, holding a length of wood in both hands. She stood over the man kneeling in front of her. He looked up at her. She looked down at him. She raised the wood, held it. The man kneeling in front of her was crying, saying something. She looked at his face and she looked at whatever was behind her, at the fires, at the bodies on the ground, at the specific shape of what the last hour had been, and she stood there with the wood raised above her head for a long moment. She put it down, said something to the crowd in her language. Rico didn't speak it, he didn't need to. The meaning moved through the crowd the same way the anger had, person to person, until the weapons lowered and the advance stopped and the people of the village turned away from the soldiers and toward each other. Toward their dead, toward the slow, awful work of after. The phone was quiet. Rico looked at the soldiers still kneeling in the dirt, at the fear on their faces, at the one still praying. I told you, Cecil, he said finally. Back at the cabin, I don't recognize borders as a factor in whether someone gets help. A line politicians drew on a map is not relevant information to me. He paused. I meant that. He raised his hand toward the mountain range in the distance. The closest peak lifted from the earth, slowly, with the enormous patience of something that had been in one place for 10 million years and had just been asked to go somewhere else. It floated toward the village. The soldiers watched it come and made various sounds. Some prayed harder. Some tried to run and found their legs weren't cooperating. One just stared at it with the blank expression of a man who had passed the limit of what his mind could process and was now just waiting. Rico's fingers moved, quick, almost casual, a conductor closing a piece. The mountain separated in the air into blocks of granite and basalt, each one moving to its position with the unhurried efficiency of a thing being built correctly. Walls, divisions, a roof, a prison. He looked at it for a moment, then at the soldiers. They went in. The door, a slab of granite 6 feet thick, settled into place with a sound like the world making a decision. Rico brushed his hands together. On the other end of the line, Cecil said nothing. The silence had a quality to it, not approval, not disapproval, just the silence of a man who had watched something and was still deciding what it meant. Rico looked down at the phone in his hand. I'm not a god, Cecil. I am perfect. Then he looked up, way up, his eyes narrowed, above the cloud layer, barely perceptible even to his key sense, a signature. Enormous. Still, the specific quality of something that had been there for a while and had not announced itself. Of course, he looked at the phone again. I'll be in touch, he said. He set it down in the dirt. Went skyward, fast, the kind of fast where the clouds were gone before he'd registered passing through them, the blue darkening, the curve of the earth appearing and then the full sphere of it, and then the silence of space with no walls and no ground and nothing in any direction except distance. He decelerated, stopped, looked at the planet, thought about the woman with the board, thought about a lot of things. Then, mostly to himself. I was really hoping this wasn't one of those cliché universes where Superman is evil. Excuse me, Nolan Grayson was 10 feet to his left, arms crossed, cape moving in the solar wind. The expression he always wore, controlled, measured, something running behind the eyes that never quite made it to the surface. He had been up here for a while. Rico looked at him. Looked back at Earth. You heard me, bitch, he said. 3.0 vote, holy bitch slap, you heard me, bitch. Nolan looked at him, and before anything else, Rico crossed his arms. I know you've been watching me. The whole time. It's kind of hard to relax when there's a goddamn alien with the second biggest key signature on the planet staring at you from 20 kilometers up. He tilted his head. Get a hobby. Is there no Spider-Man in this reality or something? Nolan said nothing. The silence between them had the specific quality of something being measured. Okay. Rico's voice shifted. Not louder. Something more precise. I was willing to give you the benefit of the doubt for a while. Genuinely. Big guy, serious face, clearly carrying something heavy. I get it, not everyone's a people person. He looked at Nolan. But today you sat up here and watched those people die and didn't move. And I want you to understand something about my eyesight. He let that sit for a second. It's stupid good. I could see your face from 200 feet up. He paused. You were looking at them like they were ants. Nolan said nothing. His expression gave nothing. He had the specific stillness of someone who had decided that stillness was the correct response and was committed to it. So, Rico put a hand to his chin. Let me think about this. Government experiment. Ancient deity who woke up and decided to cosplay as a hero. He tapped his chin once. Or you were sent here by a warrior alien race to conquer the planet and enslave everybody. Something crossed Nolan's face. Small. A fraction of a second. Gone. But there. Aha. Rico pointed at him. Warrior alien race. Genuinely. I have to say, extremely cliché. Very done before. In my universe we had a whole species that. Nolan moved. No warning. No shift in posture. No tell. Just. Gone from where he was, across the distance between them in no measurable time, both hands driving into Rico's face with everything he had. The force behind it was the kind that ended things. Had ended things, many times, on many worlds. The shockwave expanded outward in a perfect sphere. Every satellite within 700 kilometers stopped being a satellite. The flash reached Earth's surface as a pulse that knocked out power grids across 3 continents for 11 seconds and left Cecil Stedman staring at a blank display with an expression that was doing a great deal of quiet work. Rico had not moved. His feet were exactly where they'd been. His head hadn't turned. Nolan's fist was against his face and Rico was looking at him over it with the mild expression of someone who had been handed the wrong order at a drive-thru. Rico said. Cute. He raised his hand. My turn. Nolan left the space around Earth at a fraction of the speed of light. He hit a satellite and the satellite became a debris field. He kept going. He hit an asteroid and the asteroid became the asteroid belt's new contribution. He kept going. Past the orbit of Mars. Through the belt. Past Jupiter. The moons of Saturn growing from points to spheres as he decelerated involuntarily against the gravity of the largest planet in the solar system. And then Titan was coming up fast and he hit its surface with both arms forward and left a crater the size of a city in the ice and rock. The dust settled slowly in the low gravity. Nolan lay in the crater for a moment. Then pushed himself up, coughed blood onto the orange surface of Titan. His left eardrum was gone. The world had a specific tilt to it that would pass, eventually, but wasn't passing yet. He planted one foot, then the other, got upright through the specific stubbornness of someone who had decided not to stay down. He looked up. Rico came through Titan's atmosphere like it wasn't there and landed 20 feet away with the easy finality of someone arriving somewhere they'd already planned to be. He looked at the crater. looked at Nolan. I'll be honest, he said. Even I'm a little impressed by that one. Holy bitch slap. Jesus Christ. Nolan looked at him, said nothing. His balance was compromised. His left side was ringing with the specific silence of a damaged ear recalibrating. He ran the numbers with what was available to him, the impact, the distance, the fact that his arm still worked and his spine was intact only because whatever had hit him had been calibrated, had chosen how much force to use, and arrived at a number he didn't like. This thing is as strong as Thrag. Maybe stronger. So, Rico said, sitting down on a rock with the ease of someone settling in for a conversation. Reflecting on your life choices. Nolan straightened, found his balance, set his jaw. Do it, he said. Do what? Kill me, even, certain. You know what I am. You know what my mission is. I've been compromised. He held Rico's eyes. You're stronger than me. Kill me and be done with it. He meant it. No calculation behind it, no play. Just a man who had run the logic to its conclusion and was presenting it clearly. Somewhere in the back of his mind, not acknowledged, not examined, the weight of two specific people. The specific shape of a life he had built here that was supposed to be temporary and had become something he didn't have a category for. He buried it. Rico looked at him for a long moment. No, he said. Nolan stared at him. What? No. Rico leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You haven't actually done anything yet. You watched some people die from a distance, which, I have thoughts about that, significant thoughts, but it's not a capital offense. He tilted his head. I don't kill without a reason. That's not how I work. Nolan looked at him. The model he'd been running since the White House, the threat assessment, the contingency, the careful architecture of how to handle this variable, had just been handed information it didn't know what to do with. Warrior race, Rico said. Viltrumit, right, you're like a Saiyajin. I don't know that word. You wouldn't. Different universe. Rico picked up a rock from the crater floor and turned it over in his hand. Planet Vegeta, warrior species, strong, built for combat, made their living conquering planets and selling them to the highest bidder. Nolan absorbed this. When he spoke, his voice had a particular precision to it. We are nothing like that, he said. The Viltrum Empire does not conquer planets to sell them to other species. A beat. That would be a very small ambition. Rico looked up from the rock. Interesting word, small. He set the rock down. Because the king of the Saiyajins, Vegeta, was strong enough to destroy a planet with one hand. And a species with that kind of power available to them spent their time flipping conquered worlds for alien buyers. He paused. Which, you have to admit, is a pretty limited vision. With that ceiling, you could take the whole galaxy. Why stop at real estate? Nolan said nothing, but something behind his eyes was moving. A thought arriving that he was watching arrive and could not stop. Unless, Rico said. He waited. The thought finished arriving. Unless they weren't the top of the food chain, Nolan said. Quietly, almost to himself. Unless there was something else out there that made planet selling a reasonable limit to operate within. Rico looked at him, said nothing. What were they? Nolan said. The ones above them. And there it was, the real question, the one underneath everything, delivered without the armor of the previous ones. Not tactical, not calculated, the specific vulnerability of someone who had just understood that the universe they thought they knew had a ceiling they hadn't seen yet. Rico's key rose, slowly, then with gathering purpose. Titan noticed. The ground began to tremble, not the sharp impact of force applied from outside, but the deep structural shudder of a world reacting to something that had no business being present on it. Volcanoes that had been dormant for geological ages vented simultaneously on the horizon. The methane lakes on the surface began to bubble, their orange-brown surfaces disturbed by something moving through the moon's interior like a sound too large for the rock to hold. The sky darkened at the edges. Eruptions flickered in every direction. Nolan looked around, at the eruptions, at the bubbling lakes, at the ground deciding whether it wanted to remain in one piece. Then at Rico, sitting on his rock in the center of all of it, looking back at him with a smile that had several things in it at once. Nolan's fists closed. Fight or die, the only calculus that had ever mattered. The only one that had never been wrong. He looked at Rico's face. His fists opened. He swallowed. What happened to the Saiyajins? He said. The ground stopped shaking. The volcanoes went quiet. The lakes flattened. The eruptions on the horizon winked out one by one until the sky was just orange and still and very far from anything. The smile on Rico's face changed. Lost the layers. became something simpler, genuine, easy, the relaxed smile of someone sharing a punchline they've been sitting on for a while and are genuinely happy to finally deliver. They got wiped out, he said. Cheerfully, warmly, almost, every last one. Well, almost. A handful made it, but the species that did it didn't really consider them a serious problem. He tilted his head pleasantly. More of an administrative decision, honestly. Silence. Titan's thin wind moved across the crater between them. Nolan sat with that for a moment. What were they? He said. The ones that did it. Rico looked at him, then looked up at the sky above Titan. At the stars visible through the orange haze. At the particular direction that, in his universe, had contained a certain planet with a certain emperor. You don't want to know, he said. Not ominously, just honestly. Anyway, he looked back at Nolan. How's the eardrum? That's going to take a minute. 11 comments 0 vote. Mindfuck. The room was quiet. How many satellites? Cecil said. Donald looked at his tablet. Then looked at it again, the way you look at a number you've calculated correctly and wish you hadn't. We're still assessing, he said. But based on the pulse radius and the debris distribution, he paused. Sir, it may be faster to count the ones that are still functional. Cecil looked at the frozen frame on the auxiliary screen. The last image before the feed cut, 2 figures at the edge of the atmosphere, one of them moving toward the other with everything it had. Get me lip readers, he said. I want to know what they were saying before it happened. Already requested. They're working with what we have but the resolution. I want results, not caveats. Yes sir. Cecil turned to the room. Get me a line to the Joint Chiefs. And someone find out why the White House is calling. An analyst near the back raised her hand. Sir, we're getting reports from NORAD. They're classifying the pulse as a potential nuclear detonation. They want confirmation before they tell them it wasn't nuclear. Sir, how do we? Because if it were nuclear we'd be having a different conversation right now. He looked at her. Tell them it wasn't nuclear and that we're handling it and that I'll brief the relevant parties when I have something to brief them with. She nodded and reached for her headset. Donald appeared at his shoulder. Sir. Low. Just for him. The pulse radius. The force required to generate a shockwave of this magnitude in the upper atmosphere. He stopped. Chose the next words carefully. We've been running comparisons. The closest analog in our database is the Kaiju incident of 2009. The one that required full Guardian response and Omni-Man to resolve. Cecil looked at him. That shockwave was a fraction of this one, Donald said. Cecil looked at the blank screens. Thought about a file on his desk marked theoretical. Thought about a number, 6%. Thought about the fact that based on what Donald was telling him, 6% had just become optimistic. Keep working, he said. I want eyes back up. Whatever it takes. Sir. Donald hesitated. What do we think happened up there? Cecil looked at the auxiliary screen. At the last frozen frame. At 2 figures at the edge of the world. I think, he said carefully, that we're going to find out. He went to answer the White House. Across 3 continents, in the 11 seconds that the power grids went down. A surgeon in Berlin lost his monitors mid-procedure and worked by instinct until the backup generators came online, which took 4 seconds, which was 3 seconds longer than it should have taken, which was going to be in a report. A trading floor in Tokyo went dark and came back up to find that 11 seconds of blind trading had produced results that would take 2 weeks to fully untangle. A meteorologist in Nairobi, whose equipment had been tracking an unusual atmospheric event over the Horn of Africa, watched her data disappear and then come back corrupted, and spent the rest of the afternoon trying to explain to her supervisor what she thought she'd seen before it vanished. In Washington, D.C., the White House Situation Room had been running on emergency power since the pulse and was currently hosting a conversation about nuclear response protocols that the people in it very much hoped would remain theoretical. In a residential neighborhood in Chicago, a teenage boy with a bruise forming on his forearm from a training session with his father sat on the roof of his house, looked up at the sky, and thought about a green figure he'd met over New Jersey. Somewhere over the Atlantic, moving fast and low, a GDA drone was trying to re-establish satellite uplink and failing. Cecil Stedman's phone had 47 missed calls. He was answering the 48th. Titan. So, Rico said, tell me about Viltrum. Nolan said nothing. He was sitting against the crater wall, one hand pressed to the side of his head where the eardrum was still recalibrating, and looking at the orange surface of Titan's floor with the expression of a man deciding what to give and what to keep. Come on. Rico leaned back on his rock. Don't be shy. Silence. You know, Rico said conversationally. I could probably expand my key sense from here and pick up Viltrumit signatures. Shouldn't take long. Find one or two, have a chat, maybe take a field trip to your homeworld. Nolan looked up. No, he said. The word came out before the thought finished arriving. He heard it land and watched Rico's expression shift. Not surprise, just confirmation of something he'd already suspected. That's not necessary, Nolan said. More controlled this time. That won't be necessary. There we go. Rico pointed at him. That's the spirit. Nolan looked at him for a long moment. Then he straightened against the crater wall. Set his jaw. The posture of someone who has decided what they're going to do and is doing it. The Empire, he said, has existed for thousands of years. We don't sell planets. We don't bargain with lesser species. His voice carried the specific weight of something recited so many times it had become belief rather than memory. We take what we need. We eliminate weakness. We advance the civilizations we conquer by centuries. Every world under our rule becomes stronger, more ordered, more capable than it was. He looked at Rico. What you did today in that village, maintaining order, directing force, preventing chaos, we do that for entire planets. Permanently. Rico listened. Our numbers are vast, Nolan continued. Our legions number in the billions. Every Viltrumit is born and trained to be what I am. A pause. What you did to me today, our Grand Regent could do the same to 100 of your kind. Rico's expression shifted. Something came into it that hadn't been there before. Before you had my curiosity, he said. Now you have my erection. Nolan stared at him. Sorry, Rico said. That was the Tism talking. Continue. Nolan continued looking at him for a moment with the expression of a man updating his threat assessment in a direction he hadn't anticipated. Then he looked away. Rico stood, started walking the crater floor slowly, the way he did when he was thinking. Okay, so, undercover conqueror, I got that part. He turned it over. But here's what doesn't add up. You were clearly the strongest thing on the planet before I showed up. Dominating Earth should have been, what, a Tuesday? A slow Tuesday? Nolan said nothing. So why the long game? The decades of playing hero? He stopped walking. There's something else. Something you're not saying. Nolan's jaw was tight. Rico started walking again, slowly, thinking out loud. Only resources. What resources would Earth have that would interest an empire at this scale? Water. Europa has more water than all of Earth's oceans combined. Minerals. He shook his head. You're not flying across the galaxy for minerals. So what does Earth have that? He stopped, stood still for a moment. The memory arrived without being called. Where did you meet him? The specific quality of that voice, the fist not quite closed. A boy in a red shirt falling out of the sky over New Jersey. 950. Not bad for a first day. Life, Rico said. He turned and looked at Nolan directly. Nolan said nothing, but his face had gone very still in the way faces go still when they're no longer performing stillness but actually achieving it. Rico extended his arm. The telekinesis took Nolan off the crater floor without ceremony. Not violent, just absolute, the specific indignity of being moved by something that isn't touching you and can't be argued with. He crossed the distance between them and Rico's hand closed around the side of his head. Nolan's hands came up immediately. Grabbed Rico's wrist, pulled, found the grip completely immovable and pulled anyway, because 1,000 years of muscle memory didn't have an off switch. I really hoped I wouldn't need to do this, Rico said. But I have a feeling you haven't been entirely honest with me. He pushed inward. Nolan screamed. The first time in centuries. The sound came out of him before he could stop it, raw, involuntary, the specific register of a nervous system encountering something it had no framework for. Pain he understood. Injury he understood. This was neither. This was something moving through his mind like a hand through water, displacing everything it touched. Rico saw Viltrum, ancient and enormous, spires of stone under a blue sky, a child with Nolan's face learning what his hands were for. A father, a mother, a ritual that was also a fight that was also a threshold, and crossing it meant something that didn't have a word in any human language. A funeral, an emperor, the specific gravity of a civilization losing the thing it was built around. The purge, Viltrumit killing Viltrumit in the name of strength, the weak culled from the species until what remained was something that couldn't be stopped. A virus, bodies, the numbers falling, a species that had numbered in the billions reduced to something that could fit in a room. Less than 50, a mission, find compatible species, seed the bloodline, rebuild the numbers. Earth, green and blue from orbit. A woman with dark hair laughing at something on a television. The specific surprise of finding something you hadn't expected to find. A boy, small, then less small, a bruise on his arm from training. Looking up at his father with an expression Nolan had never been trained to interpret and had spent years trying. Rico let go. He took 3 steps back and sat down hard on the crater floor and pressed both hands against the sides of his head. 1,000 years of memory in 10 seconds. The compression of it, the sheer weight, everything that a life spanning centuries accumulates when it's forced through a channel too small for it, hit him like the asteroid belt at speed. His vision went white, then orange, then the surface of Titan came back, and with it the specific biological response he'd forgotten he was still capable of. He vomited on the ice. Twice, then sat there breathing through whatever cell had instead of a respiratory system and waited for the world to stabilize. Nolan was on the crater floor. Not unconscious, his eyes were open, but not entirely present either. The specific vacancy of someone whose mind has been touched in a place it had never been touched before and is taking stock of what remains. Rico looked at him. The disgust arrived slowly. Not heat, not rage, something colder, the specific quality of someone who has seen the full accounting and is now deciding what it adds up to. He stood, walked over, looked down at Nolan. "You disgust me," he said. He raised his hand, the key gathered in his palm, not the slow build of the volcano trick, not theater, just the clean honest assembly of force. Gold and steady, a sphere that grew with the specific patience of something that wasn't in a hurry because it didn't need to be. The atmosphere of Titan began to move. Nolan looked up at him. His expression had cleared, not recovered, not healed, but present again, the soldier returning to the surface. He looked at the sphere. At Rico's face. At the sphere again. He closed his eyes. "Debbie, Mark, I could kill you right now," Rico said. "I'd be settling the debt for every living thing you erased over 1,000 years. Every civilization, every world." His voice was even, not performative, just true. "The math isn't even close." The sphere grew. The wind on Titan's surface had reached the speed of a major storm. Nolan's eyes remained closed. The sphere stopped growing. Then slowly, without drama, it dissipated. The light fading from Rico's palm, the key withdrawing, the wind dropping back to nothing. Rico stood over Nolan for a moment longer. "Death is too light a sentence," he said. He lowered his hand. "Some people deserve second chances. I believe that, genuinely." He looked at Nolan's face. "But your hands are soaked in blood that will never come clean." And after seeing what I just saw, he shook his head. "You make the Saiyajins look like amateurs." Nolan opened his eyes. Rico looked at him with something that wasn't quite pity and wasn't quite contempt. Something in between. "What I find interesting," he said, "is that you don't even see it yourself yet. What 20 years of living here has done to you." He tilted his head. Who would have thought? A monster learning what it means to love something. Nolan stared at him. "You live, Nolan Grayson," Rico said. "That's your sentence. You live, and you'll spend whatever time you have left correcting what you've done to every living thing unfortunate enough to have crossed your path." He paused. No rest, no peace, just the work. He looked at Nolan one more time. "The Viltrumite people aren't lost. Not yet. Their future isn't written." He rose off the crater floor slowly. "The future of this galaxy shall be perfect." He turned skyward. And Nolan looked up. "The boy, whatever you're planning, whatever Viltrum is expecting from him." Rico's expression didn't change. "Don't." He went straight up through Titan's atmosphere and was gone. The crater was very quiet. Nolan sat in it for a long time. 24 comments 0 vote. Fried chicken and Telemundo. The sun hadn't committed to rising yet when Rico touched down on the lawn. He stood there for a second. Looked at the sky going from black to that specific dark blue that exists only in the 10 minutes before dawn. Breathed the mountain air. Then extended his key outward. Casually. The way you glance around a room when you walk in. 20 signatures. Spaced around the property with the deliberate geometry of people who knew what they were doing. Cloaked, invisible, completely undetectable by any conventional means. "Morning," Rico said, to the lawn. 20 meters to his left, a cloaked GDA agent went very still. "Morning," he said, to a different part of the lawn. 10 meters to his right, another one. None of them responded. The quality of the silence shifted though, the specific silence of people who had been invisible and had just discovered that invisible wasn't the same as undetectable. Rico whistled to himself and walked toward the door. The air next to the entrance displaced itself and Cecil Stedman just appeared out of thin air, the teleportation device on his wrist still powering down. "Good morning to you too, Cecil," Rico said, without looking. Cecil looked at him, head to toe. No injuries, no burns, no blood, no sign of a confrontation that had, according to Donald's last update, destroyed billions of dollars worth of orbital infrastructure and generated a debris field that was going to complicate space launches for the next several decades. "No Omni-Man," he looked at Rico's face. "Is he alive?" he said. Rico had his hand on the door frame. He paused there for a moment. Cecil prepared himself for an answer he didn't want. "Nah, he dead," Rico said, in a completely normal tone of voice. "Tossed his ass into the black hole at the center of the galaxy." He walked inside, left the door open. Cecil stood at the entrance. In his earpiece, "Sir, evacuation is complete. Guardians are on standby. Your word." Cecil looked at the open door. "Hold," he said. He walked in. Rico was on the couch. A Mexican telenovela was playing at a volume that suggested genuine personal investment. He had a bucket of fried chicken balanced on his knee, fried chicken that Cecil was fairly certain had not been in any of the safe house provisions he'd personally approved, and was eating with the focused attention of someone watching something important unfold. He glanced up when Cecil entered. "Chicken, no," Cecil said. "Your loss," Rico said, and looked back at the screen. Cecil crossed the room, sat in the armchair, and for a moment he just sat there, because he'd been awake for going on 19 hours and had spent most of them managing cascading institutional crises generated by whatever had happened in the upper atmosphere, and the man responsible for all of it was currently watching a telenovela and eating fried chicken and offering him some. On screen, a woman was discovering something terrible about her husband. "What happened up there?" Cecil said. Rico picked up a piece of chicken. Considered it. "Me and Omni-Man had some things to work out," he said. "Our damage assessment came in an hour ago." Cecil kept his voice even. $40 billion in destroyed orbital assets. A debris field in low Earth orbit that's going to affect space launches for decades. 3 continents lost power for 11 seconds. He paused. The White House was panicking while discussing nuclear response protocols. "I'll clean up the debris," Rico said. "Give me a day." "Sell. This is genuinely very good television, Cecil. Have you ever watched telenovelas?" "I have not. The craft is completely underrated." He gestured at the screen. "This woman has been suspicious that her husband was a murderer, for 3 episodes, and she was right the entire time. That's good writing." Cecil looked at him, looked at the screen, looked back at him. "The body," he said. "If Omni-Man is Sir. Donald," in his earpiece, sharp. "Radar contact. High-velocity atmospheric entry over the Atlantic. Trajectory suggests, sir, it's Omni-Man. He's heading toward Chicago, toward his residence." Cecil stopped talking, closed his eyes. The relief arrived the way relief does when you've been holding a worst-case scenario in your hands for 11 hours and someone finally takes it away. Not dramatic, just the sudden absence of weight. He sat with it for a moment, let it move through him. Opened his eyes. Rico was holding the bucket out toward him. Patient, unhurried. Cecil looked at the fried chicken. He thought about the 19 hours. About the Joint Chiefs. About the UN Security Council. About the President of the United States asking him to explain, clearly and simply, why this was not a nuclear event and what it actually was, a question Cecil had answered with more confidence than he felt. He took a piece. Rico nodded once, satisfied, and turned back to the television. They sat in silence. Cecil eating fried chicken at 5 in the morning in a government-safe house while a telenovela played and the sun finally decided to come up over the Blue Ridge Mountains. "What happened between you two?" Rico was quiet for a moment. On the screen, the husband had started crying. The wife was not moved. "We had a conversation," Rico said. "A long one." Cecil waited. "That's all I've got for you right now." Cecil looked at him. Rico looked at the television. The husband was having a very bad time. Cecil ate his chicken. "All right," he said. Outside, the sky finished turning blue. 6 comments 0 vote. Perfect justice. War. Rico was in line at the ShopRite in Martinsburg humming aerials to himself. Not loud. The kind of humming that happens when you stop noticing you're doing it. Headphones in, card in front of him, the specific patience of someone who had nowhere to be and had made peace with the checkout line as a condition of existence. The card had opinions. Doritos in 3 flavors, 2 family-size Cheetos, Takis, regular and fuego, because he hadn't known which one, and the answer to uncertainty was both. 4 boxes of Oreos, a Lunchable he'd picked up out of pure morbid curiosity. And at the bottom, somehow, a singular apple that he couldn't fully account for. The woman behind him had been holding her phone at an angle that let her look at Rico without technically looking at Rico for about 4 minutes. The man behind her had given up on subtlety entirely. A kid, maybe 7, in the adjacent lane was staring up at him with the open, uncomplicated curiosity of someone who hadn't learned yet that staring was a social violation. Rico looked down at him. Still humming. He pointed finger guns. The kid grabbed his mother's sleeve with both hands and buried his face in her jacket. She looked up, registered the full situation, and found something extremely important to examine on her grocery list. The line moved forward. The cashier had blonde hair and a name tag that said Emily, and the professional composure of someone who had decided, somewhere in the last 2 seconds, that this was just going to be her Tuesday. She looked up when Rico arrived at the belt. Did the thing. The rapid sequence of "oh, okay, we're doing this," and started scanning without comment. He started unloading the cart. He caught himself. Took off his headphone. "Hi," he said. "Hi," Emily said. She scanned the Doritos, then the other Doritos, then the third Doritos. She glanced at the cart. Back at him, kept scanning. "Emily," Rico said. She looked at her name tag. At him, "Yeah. Good name." She blinked. "Thank you, very." He thought about it, dependably. "Emily. You look like an Emily. Not everyone looks like their name." She considered this while scanning the Cheetos. "Do you look like yours?" "Absolutely," he said. "I'm Mr. Perfect Cell." The Oreos stopped moving. She looked at him, at the name tag she wasn't wearing. Back at him. The whole thing, non-negotiable. Something moved at the corner of her mouth. She scanned the Oreos. "Okay, Mr. Perfect Cell. See, fits perfectly, if you say so." She scanned the Takis, looked at both bags. "Regular or Fuego?" "Both. I didn't know which. Fuego's better." "I thought so, but I didn't want to commit without." He produced a wallet from somewhere. She hadn't seen him reach for it, it had just appeared. It had a driver's license inside it that clearly did not belong to him, and started counting bills. Various denominations, slightly crumpled in the specific way money gets when it's been acquired quickly and without full ceremony. "Can I ask you something, Emily?" "Sure. What time do you get off?" She looked at him. He looked back at her with complete sincerity. "I'm seeing someone," she said. "Good for you." Completely without bitterness. "He treating you right?" She laughed, short and real and a little surprised. "Yeah, he is." "Good." He counted out the last bill and slid it across. "He's a lucky guy, Emily." She shook her head and handed him the receipt. "You have a good day, Mr. Perfect Cell." "Every day's a good day," he said, picked up all 7 bags in one hand, and walked out. The parking lot was quiet. Rico set the bags down by a card return and stood there looking at the apple sitting on top of one of the bags. He really couldn't explain the apple. His phone rang. "Cecil." "Hello," Rico said. "We have a situation." No preamble. Already inside it. Chicago. Downtown. Portals are opening and a military force is coming through. Unknown origin. Rico picked up the bags. The Guardians are in Japan evacuating a nuclear power plant and Omni-Man is not responding to contact. A pause. Team has been dispatched with additional support. They may not be enough. Say no more. Rico was already moving through the parking lot. Downtown Chicago. 10 seconds. Cell. Tell them to roll out the red carpet. He launched. The shockwave hit the parking lot like a closing argument. 3 card returns tipped. Every car alarm within 50 meters went off at once. The apple went straight up and didn't come back down for a while. Chicago. Downtown. Eve's force field buckled under a direct cannon hit and held. Her jaw was set. Her arms were shaking slightly. She would not have mentioned the arms under any circumstances. Mark was still holding the woman. Eve looked at him between salvos. At the woman in his arms. At his face. "Hey," she said, "get her to a hospital. We got this." Mark looked at her. "You're Adam Eve," he said. She stared at him. "What?" A cannon round hit the force field directly. The impact threw sparks across the street. The field cracked down the middle and Eve pushed back against it with both hands, teeth gritted. "Just go." The impact hit the center of the flaxen column like a meteor. No aircraft, no missile, Something from directly above moving at a velocity that made the question of origin less relevant than the fact of arrival. The crater it left was enormous. The shockwave rolled down 3 city blocks and set off everything in range simultaneously. Everything stopped. The Flaxons, the firing, the advance. From the crater, something stepped out. Green, 2 meters tall, wings folded. It stepped over a tank with the mild attention of someone stepping over a garden hose and stood in the middle of the street looking at the portals. Eve looked at it. What? She said, to no one, just the word, by itself. Robot processed the figure against his GDA briefing in 0.3 seconds. Filed the confirmation. Reinforcements, he said. That's a reinforcement. The Flaxons recovered and opened up. Every weapon on the field redirected simultaneously. Tank cannons, rifles, laser arrays, all of it concentrated on the green figure. The smoke rose and thickened until the figure was completely gone. Rex looked at the smoke from behind a wall. Should we? He's fine, Robot said. They're hitting him with everything. I've read the file. Robot's drone adjusted altitude. He's fine. The smoke kept rising. Nothing came back out. Eve kept her force field up with both hands and looked at the smoke and decided not to say what she was thinking. Inside the smoke, Rico was thinking about an animated movie from his old life. The fire was constant and doing nothing. He ignored it and looked at the portals. There, still cycling, crimson and humming with the specific wrongness of something that had no business existing in downtown Chicago on a Tuesday. Invasion. He knew the genre. Advance force, softening, clearing, then whatever came through after. In his old life, there was an animated movie called Justice League, War. In this movie, Earth had been invaded by the forces of apocalypse much like this. And if there was even a small chance there exists something even remotely close to Darkseid in this universe. There was something in his chest that wasn't quite fear but lived close enough that he respected it. Cecil, go ahead. Are there other portals? Anywhere on Earth? Pause. Exchange with Donald. Negative. Chicago only. Rico looked at the portals. Portal invasions follow a pattern, he said carefully. Advance force. Soften. Clear the area. Then the main event comes through. He paused. And I can't sense ki from the other side of those things. I don't know what's waiting. Cecil was quiet. What are you thinking? He said. Rico looked at the casualties. At the burning blocks. At the portals still cycling, patient and green and wrong. I'm thinking that if something comes through those portals that requires me to actually try, he said, Earth may be fucked. He spread his arms. The telekinesis went out. Not subtle, not careful. A wave of force that grabbed everything metal and moving and airborne in a 6-block radius and held it. Tanks lifted off the street. Soldiers left the ground. Hundreds of lasguns stopped midair, hanging in the smoke in perfect stillness. Rex Splode climbed out from behind a barrier to check the situation and found a 40-ton tank floating at eye level 2 feet from his face. He looked at it. It was very close. Huh, Rex said. Rico brought his arms forward. Everything went back through the portals at speed. The advance force, the vehicles, the columns, reversed and launched, returned with the efficiency of someone who was done with this. The soldiers coming out met the soldiers going in at a velocity that resolved the encounter immediately. The portals strobed violently. The street was empty. Teen Team stood in the sudden absence of everything that had been happening and looked at the smoke and the craters and the portals still humming. Rex opened his mouth. Rico brought his hands together. Rex closed his mouth, took a step back, me. The sphere assembled between his palms. Blue, steady. The light from it didn't flicker, it just was, filling the block, washing out the fires, reaching the portals and making their Simpson edges look pale and small and very far from sufficient. Robot's sensors flickered. Eve had both hands over her mouth. Me. The buildings groaned in unison. A fire hydrant gave up. Rex had backed up several more steps without consciously deciding to. Rico stared at the central portal. The moment even an oversized toe steps through that, he said, quietly, to the portal specifically, I'm going full Frieza on your planet. He meant it. The portal hummed. Then it started closing. Slowly at first. Then the others, one by one, the red edges contracting, the hum dropping in frequency, the light dying. Nothing. Rico stood there with a fully charged Kamehameha and absolutely nothing to fire it at. He looked at his hands. At the empty air, he let the ki disperse. The blue light fading back into the afternoon. The pressure releasing. The city exhaling. he said. Rex looked at the empty street. At the craters. Did they just, he gestured, leave? It would appear so, Robot said. Eve lowered her hand slowly. Looked at the smoke, at the green figure standing in the middle of the empty street. Who is that? She said. That would be Cell. Robot said. I was briefed. You were briefed. Yes. And you didn't need to know basis, Robot said. You didn't need to know. Eve looked at him with an expression that had several things in it and was keeping all of them very controlled. Rico looked at the empty space one more moment. That, he said, was deeply anticlimactic. A beat. I had a whole thing ready. To be continued.